Unaware his pregnant wife had just inherited her grandfather's billionaire, dollar empire worth $30 billion, David Montgomery served Jessica divorce papers at the Christmas party in front of 200 colleagues, calling her a financial burden and dead weight while his hand rested on his mistress's back, completely oblivious that the woman he was publicly destroying while she carried his child had become one of the wealthiest women in America exactly 43 minutes earlier. The wife he dismissed as worthless, the pregnant woman he abandoned for a younger associate, the inheritance he knew nothing about, and the $30 billion fortune that would arrive in her email before dessert was served. But what happened when Jessica's phone buzzed with that life-altering notification would shatter her husband in ways that would make him wish he'd never served those divorce papers. Would Jessica reveal her $30 billion inheritance right there at the Christmas party, exposing her husband's cruelty before everyone who watched him betray his pregnant wife? Would she tell him about the baby he didn't know existed, the grandfather's empire he'd never heard of, or the fortune that made his betrayal the most expensive mistake of his life? And what would her husband do when he discovered the worthless, pregnant wife he discarded at the Christmas party was actually the billionaire heiress to a $30 billion empire? The very company his law firm had been desperately trying to secure as a client for 3 years. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand View Hotel ballroom cast dancing light across Jessica's face, but she couldn't feel their warmth. Her hands trembled as she stared at the cream-colored envelope David had just placed in her palm. The expensive paper stock the kind lawyers used when they wanted you to know this was serious, this was final, this was real. Around her, 200 people in cocktail dresses and sharp suits held champagne flutes frozen midair, conversations dying like candles snuffed out one by one. Everyone's eyes turning toward the spectacle unfolding near the 12-foot Christmas tree, with its white lights that suddenly felt more like searchlights in an interrogation room. David stood 3 feet away in his Tom Ford tuxedo, the one she'd picked up from the dry cleaners last Tuesday, the one she'd made sure was perfect because she knew this party mattered to him, because making him happy had been her entire world for 7 years. His expression was calm, almost kind, which somehow made everything worse. That fake gentleness in his voice, like he was explaining something simple to a child who just couldn't understand. "I think it's better this way, Jess," he said, loud enough for the senior partners to hear. Loud enough for Amanda Chen to hear from where she stood 5 feet behind him in that red dress that probably cost more than Jessica earned in a month at her nonprofit job. "You'll understand eventually. We've grown apart. You want different things. I need someone who understands my ambitions." Jessica's purse hung heavy on her shoulder. Inside it, wrapped in silver paper with a tiny bow, sat a Christmas ornament she'd bought that morning from a small shop on Michigan Avenue. Inside that ornament, carefully placed, was a positive pregnancy test and a note written in her careful handwriting that read, "Daddy's first Christmas, December 2024. She'd practiced how she'd give it to him, imagined his face lighting up, imagined him pulling her close and whispering that everything was going to be okay, that they'd figure it out together, that maybe this was exactly what they needed. Instead, she was holding divorce papers. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, a protective gesture so small that no one noticed. 8 weeks. She'd known for 2 weeks. She'd been waiting for the right moment, and tonight was supposed to be that moment. Here at the Christmas party where they'd first met 7 years ago, when she was a graduate student volunteer, and he was a young associate who'd made her laugh, who'd made her feel seen, who'd promised her the world. At the Christmas party, the words came out steadier than she felt. "You're doing this at your firm's Christmas party?" "Our firm," he corrected automatically, then caught himself. "Well, my firm. You never really worked here, did you?" His smile was thin, sharp as a paper cut. "I thought it would be easier this way. Clean, public, no drawn-out drama." Behind him, Rachel Morrison, one of the senior partners, stood near the bar with her husband, her eyes meeting Jessica's for just 1 second before she looked away. Everyone was looking away now, embarrassed or complicit, Jessica couldn't tell which. 3 junior associates near the dessert table had their phones out. She could practically see the group texts flying through the firm's social network, the story being written in real time, and she knew exactly how it would read. David finally left his deadweight wife. Good for him. She never fit in here anyway. David, can we at least talk about this privately? Jessica hated the pleading note in her voice, hated that she was giving him this satisfaction. But 7 years of marriage couldn't just end in 2 minutes near a Christmas tree while waiters circled with crab cakes and everyone pretended not to stare. There's nothing to talk about. He gestured to the papers in her hand. It's all very straightforward. You can keep your car. Obviously, the apartment is mine. Well, the lease is in my name. I've been more than generous with the terms, considering you haven't contributed financially to our marriage in any meaningful way. The words hit like physical blows. Jessica thought about the dinners she'd cooked when he worked late, the dry cleaning she'd picked up, the social events she'd organized and attended, playing the perfect lawyer's wife, smiling at partners' spouses, remembering everyone's names and their children's names and their vacation plans. She thought about the editing she'd done on his briefs at midnight, the research she'd helped with, always uncredited, always invisible. She thought about the emotional labor of managing his moods, his stress, his ego, making herself smaller and smaller so he could feel bigger and bigger. But he was right about one thing. She hadn't contributed financially, not in the way that mattered to David and his world. She'd worked part-time at a small nonprofit called City Hope Alliance, managing their donor relations for $35,000 a year. She'd been good at it, really good, understanding what motivated people to give, how to build relationships that lasted, how to make donors feel like partners instead of ATMs. But David had always dismissed it as charity work, something nice that kept her busy, but not real work. Not important work. Not work that mattered. She'd wanted to go back to school, finish her master's degree in social work at Columbia. She'd had a full scholarship, a chance to specialize in trauma counseling, to build something meaningful. But David had convinced her to defer, then defer again, then finally withdraw. His career needed to take priority. They'd do it later. Later never came. I've already moved my things to Amanda's place, David continued, and Jessica's stomach dropped even though she'd known, somewhere deep down she'd known but hadn't wanted to see it. Amanda Chen, the third-year associate with a law degree from Yale and the wardrobe that screamed family money. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. I didn't want to tell you, didn't want to hurt you, but I think you deserve honesty now. 6 months. Jessica did the math automatically. That meant it started right after her birthday in June, the birthday he'd forgotten because he was too swamped with the Hendricks case, too important to remember. The birthday she'd spent alone in their apartment eating leftover Chinese food and watching reality television, telling herself it was fine, he'd make it up to her. He always did. Except he never did. He never made anything up. He just expected her to understand, to be patient, to wait. David, please. The word came out broken, and she hated herself for it, hated that after everything, after the affair, and the public humiliation, and the casual cruelty, part of her still wanted to fix this, still wanted to save them. Can't we try counseling? Can't we at least? Counseling won't change the fundamental problem. His voice was kind now, which somehow made it infinitely worse, like he was a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis with practiced sympathy. You're a good person, Jess. You really are. But you're not ambitious. You're not driven. You want this small, comfortable life, and I need more than that. I need someone who pushes me, who understands the stakes of what I'm building here. In her pocket, her phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Someone calling. She ignored it. Amanda Chen materialized at David's side, her hand sliding possessively onto his arm, and he turned to her with a smile Jessica hadn't seen in years. Warm, genuine, full of actual affection. The smile she used to think was reserved only for her, back when she was stupid enough to believe she was special. Is everything okay? Amanda's voice dripped with false concern, but her eyes gleamed with victory. This was a woman who'd won, and she knew it, and she wanted Jessica to know it too. Fine, David said. Just finishing up. Jess understands. Jessica didn't understand anything. The room felt too hot, too bright, too full of witnesses to her complete destruction. She looked down at the envelope, at the divorce papers inside that she hadn't even fully read yet. Property division, spousal support. She caught a glimpse of numbers. $800 a month for 2 years. $800. That wouldn't even cover rent in Chicago. That was what 7 years of her life was worth to him. Her phone buzzed again. Insistent, angry, someone really needed to reach her. I should go, she heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere very far away. Some part of her brain still functioning while the rest of her drowned in shock and humiliation and grief so thick she could taste it. That's probably for the best. David's relief was palpable, visible, like he'd been worried she might make a scene, and now he could relax because she was being reasonable, being mature, being exactly what he'd always wanted her to be: small, quiet, compliant. My lawyer will be in touch. Just sign the papers and send them back, and we can both move on with our lives. Move on! Like 7 years could be summarized and filed away. Like the future she'd imagined, the children they'd talked about having someday, the house they'd planned to buy, the life they were supposedly building together, could just be erased with a signature. Jessica turned, still holding the envelope, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted for her like she carried something contagious, like failure was a disease they might catch if they got too close. Maybe it was. Maybe they were all terrified that witnessing her humiliation would somehow infect their own perfect lives, their own perfect marriages, their own carefully constructed illusions. The elevator was mercifully empty. She stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and watched the numbers descend. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed exactly what she was: a woman whose life had just detonated, whose husband had just publicly discarded her, whose future had just collapsed into nothing. Her phone buzzed again, 4 missed calls, all from the same number: Hammond and Associates, attorneys at law, New York area code. She answered, her voice hollow and distant. Hello? Jessica Montgomery? The voice was professionally warm, female, carefully modulated. My name is Caroline Westbrook. I'm an attorney with Hammond and Associates. I've been trying to reach you for the past several hours. Are you somewhere private where we can talk? The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors slid open onto the marble lobby, empty except for a bored-looking security guard reading something on his phone. Jessica stepped out, her heels clicking on stone, and moved toward a quiet corner near the massive windows that looked out onto Michigan Avenue where snow had started to fall, thick and heavy and beautiful in a way that felt cruel. I'm alone, Jessica said. What is this about? There was a pause, the kind of pause that comes before everything changes. Miss Montgomery, I'm calling regarding the estate of William Montgomery. I understand he was your grandfather. Jessica stood frozen in the hotel lobby, her phone pressed against her ear, while Caroline Westbrook's words rearranged reality itself. Your grandfather passed away 3 months ago, and his will has cleared probate. Miss Montgomery, you've been named as the primary beneficiary of his estate. You've inherited Montgomery Ventures along with all associated assets, properties, and holdings. The total valuation as of last quarter is approximately $30 billion. $30 billion. The words didn't make sense. They were sounds without meaning, numbers too large to comprehend. Jessica's hand found the wall behind her, fingers splaying against cold marble to keep herself upright because the floor had suddenly become unreliable, the entire world tilting sideways. I'm sorry, she whispered. Did you just say 30 billion? Yes, ma'am, $30 billion. Your grandfather built Montgomery Ventures over 60 years, starting with commercial real estate in the 1960s and expanding into technology investments, pharmaceutical patents, telecommunications infrastructure. The company owns significant holdings in 17 countries. I have the full portfolio documentation ready to send to you, but I wanted to speak with you directly first, given the magnitude of the estate. Through the windows, Jessica watched snow fall on Michigan Avenue, each flake illuminated by streetlights, the city transformed into something. Jessica stood frozen in the hotel lobby, her phone pressed against her ear, while Caroline Westbrook's words rearranged reality itself. Your grandfather passed away 3 months ago, and his will has cleared probate. Miss Montgomery, you've been named as the primary beneficiary of his estate. You've inherited Montgomery Ventures along with all associated assets, properties, and holdings. The total valuation as of last quarter is approximately $30 billion. $30 billion. The words didn't make sense. They were sounds without meaning, numbers too large to comprehend. Jessica's hand found the wall behind her, fingers splaying against cold marble to keep herself upright because the floor had suddenly become unreliable, the entire world tilting sideways. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Did you just say 30 billion? Yes, ma'am, $30 billion. Your grandfather built Montgomery Ventures over 60 years, starting with commercial real estate in the 1960s and expanding into technology investments, pharmaceutical patents, telecommunications infrastructure. The company owns significant holdings in 17 countries. I have the full portfolio documentation ready to send to you, but I wanted to speak with you directly first, given the magnitude of the estate." Through the windows, Jessica watched snow fall on Michigan Avenue, each flake illuminated by streetlights, the city transformed into something magical and impossible. Upstairs, David was probably celebrating with Amanda, probably telling everyone how relieved he was to finally be free of his burden of a wife, probably accepting congratulations for his courage in pursuing what he really wanted. He had no idea. None of them had any idea. Why me? The question came out barely audible. Jessica thought about her grandfather, William, the quiet old man she'd met maybe 5 times in her life. He lived in a modest house in Connecticut, driven a 15-year-old Volvo, worn the same cardigan to every family gathering. She'd gone to his funeral 3 months ago, a small service with maybe 20 people, most of them employees or business associates. Her mother hadn't even bothered to attend, too busy with her new life in Arizona. Jessica had been the only family member there. Caroline's voice softened with something that might have been genuine emotion. "Your grandfather left you a letter. I can send it to you tonight if you'd like. But he wrote that you were the only family member who'd never asked him for money, the only one who'd visited him because you wanted to, not because you needed something. He said you were the only one he trusted with his life's work." Jessica remembered those visits, the handful of times she'd driven to Connecticut after her father died, after her mother remarried and emotionally checked out, after David had consumed her entire life so completely she'd almost forgotten who she'd been before him. She'd gone to see William on holidays when David was too busy with work. The old man had made her tea in his small kitchen. They'd talked about books, about history, about the way cities changed over decades, about nothing particularly important or profound. He'd asked about her work at the nonprofit, had actually listened when she explained donor psychology and relationship building. He'd never mentioned being wealthy. He'd never mentioned Montgomery Ventures. He'd just been a lonely old man who seemed happy to have company. "Miss Montgomery, I need to schedule a time for you to come to our offices in New York. There are documents to sign, decisions to be made. Montgomery Ventures is a substantial operation with over 4,000 employees worldwide. The board of directors has been managing things during probate, but they're eager to meet you, and frankly, there are significant financial decisions that require your input. Time-sensitive matters. Can you come this week?" This week, it was Monday. Christmas was in 4 days. Jessica looked down at the divorce papers still clutched in her other hand, at David's insulting settlement offer, at the clause that waived any claim to his future earnings or assets. The irony was so perfect it almost made her laugh, except nothing about this was funny. Everything about this was devastating and surreal and impossible. "Miss Montgomery, are you still there?" "Yes." Jessica's voice came out stronger now, something hardening in her chest, some part of her that had been soft and accommodating and endlessly patient, suddenly turning to steel. "I'm here. Send me everything. Tonight. I want to see all the documentation, every contract, every report, every assessment. I want to know exactly what I've inherited. Tonight? Miss Montgomery, it's quite extensive. The full portfolio is thousands of pages. Send it all, every single page. And Miss Westbrook, I'll be in New York Wednesday morning." The documentation from Hammond and Associates arriving in waves. She stood under a streetlight, snow collecting in her hair, on her shoulders, on her coat, and started reading. Montgomery Ventures wasn't just valuable, it was powerful. Real estate holdings in every major city in America and half the capitals of Europe. Early investments in technology companies that had become household names. Pharmaceutical patents worth billions. Telecommunications infrastructure that connected millions of people. The portfolio read like a directory of American corporate power. And it was hers, all of it. Hers. Jessica kept walking and reading, her feet carrying her toward Lake Michigan without conscious direction. She read about the board of directors, distinguished executives who'd been managing day-to-day operations. She read about pending deals, expansion plans, conflicts with competitors. She read her grandfather's letter, written in his careful handwriting, and this time the tears came hot and fast because he'd seen her, really seen her, in a way David never had. You were always kind, even when being kind cost you something. That's rare in our world, Jessica. Rare and precious. Use this gift wisely, but don't let it change who you are. Don't let the money corrupt what's good in you. The world needs more kindness, not less. Build something that matters. Take care of the people who work for Montgomery Ventures. They're not just employees. They're human beings with families and dreams and struggles. Remember that. Make me proud. She was crying now, tears mixing with snowflakes, grieving for the grandfather she'd barely known, but who'd known her somehow, who'd seen something in her worth trusting with his entire life's work. She was grieving for her marriage, for the 7 years she'd given to a man who'd valued her so little, he'd discarded her at a Christmas party. She was grieving for the woman she'd been that morning, naive enough to think a positive pregnancy test might fix everything, might make David love her again, might transform their dying marriage into something worth saving. That woman was gone now. Jessica could feel her dissolving with each step, each breath of cold air, each page of financial documentation she absorbed. Something new was taking shape inside her, something harder and clearer and more certain than she'd ever been. She reached down and touched her stomach where her baby grew, where David's child existed without him knowing, without him deserving to know. "It's just us now," she whispered to the child who couldn't hear her yet. "Just you and me, and I promise he will never make you feel the way he made me feel. He will never know you. This is my gift to you, freedom from him." By the time Jessica made it back to the apartment, it was after midnight. David had taken everything of value, his clothes, his desk, the good coffee maker, half the furniture, the expensive towels they'd gotten as wedding gifts. He'd divided their shared life with surgical precision, taking what mattered and leaving her the scraps. But walking through those empty rooms, Jessica felt something unexpected. Relief. This place had never been theirs. It had always been his. She'd just been living in it, arranging her life around his preferences, his schedule, his needs, making herself invisible. She made tea with the cheap electric kettle he'd left behind, sat on the worn couch he'd deemed not worth taking, and spent the next 4 hours reading every document Hammond and Associates had sent. She read until her eyes burned, until the words blurred, until she understood exactly what she'd inherited and what it meant. At dawn, she called Caroline Westbrook back. "Miss Montgomery, is everything all right? I've read everything you sent. I have questions, a lot of questions. But first, I need you to do something for me." "Of course. What do you need?" Jessica looked at the divorce papers still sitting on the coffee table where she'd left them. "I need you to recommend a divorce attorney in Chicago. The best one you know. Someone who specializes in high net worth cases. Someone who will fight." There was a pause, then understanding. "May I ask what happened?" "My husband served me divorce papers last night at his firm's Christmas party, in front of 200 people. He thinks I'm broke and desperate and grateful for whatever scraps he's willing to give me. He has absolutely no idea about the inheritance." Caroline's voice filled with something that sounded like satisfaction. "Miss Montgomery, I'll have 3 names for you within the hour, the very best Chicago has to offer. And if I may suggest, you might want to wait before signing anything your husband has proposed. The terms of your divorce could be substantially different now." Jessica smiled for the first time in 12 hours. "That's exactly what I was thinking." 3 months later, Jessica stood in the executive boardroom of Montgomery Ventures' Chicago office on the 72nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that still took her breath away. She'd been CEO for 10 weeks now. and the role fit her in ways she'd never expected. Those skills David had dismissed as meaningless, understanding what motivated people, building genuine relationships, seeing the human element in business transactions, turned out to be exactly what Montgomery Ventures needed. The board had been managing numbers, but they'd forgotten about people. Jessica remembered. She was showing now, visibly pregnant at 5 months, and she'd stopped trying to hide it. Let people see. Let them wonder. Let them whisper about the billionaire CEO having a baby. She didn't owe anyone an explanation, least of all David. Her assistant knocked softly. "Miss Montgomery, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent. David Montgomery." Jessica's hand went instinctively to her stomach, where William kicked strong and healthy. She'd named him already, chosen it weeks ago. William for her grandfather. The baby would carry the Montgomery name, would inherit this empire, would know his great-grandfather's legacy. But he would never, ever know David. "Should I tell him you're unavailable?" her assistant asked. Jessica thought about it. She'd spent the past 3 months systematically dismantling David's life piece by piece, and she'd done it so carefully he'd probably never realized she was behind it all. The apartment lease that mysteriously wasn't renewed. That building belonged to a Montgomery Ventures subsidiary. The major client his firm lost. They'd moved to a competitor owned by Montgomery Ventures. His demotion at the firm after it became clear he'd destroyed any chance of landing Montgomery Ventures as a client. Amanda leaving him when his career imploded. Every piece of his carefully constructed world had crumbled, and Jessica had orchestrated all of it from a distance, never leaving fingerprints, never giving him the satisfaction of knowing she cared enough to destroy him. But maybe it was time. Maybe he deserved to know. Maybe she deserved to look him in the eye and let him see what he'd lost. "Send him in." David looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. His hair was grayer than she remembered, or maybe she just hadn't noticed before. His eyes were desperate, haunted, the confidence completely gone. This wasn't the man who'd served her divorce papers at a Christmas party. This was someone broken. "Jessica." His voice cracked on her name. "Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve—" "You don't." Her voice was level, calm, the voice of someone who'd learned to wield power. "But I have 5 minutes. Say what you came to say." He moved closer, and she noticed her security team tense by the door. She waved them back slightly. David wasn't dangerous. He was just pathetic. "I didn't know," he said. "About your grandfather. About the money. About Montgomery Ventures. If I had known—" "If you had known?" Jessica's laugh was cold. "Then what, David? You would have stayed. You would have loved me then. You would have valued me if you'd known I was worth $30 billion? That's not what I meant. I made a mistake. I can see that now. We were good together once. We could be good again. I still care about you, Jess. I never stopped caring." "Don't." The word came out sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare rewrite history. You didn't care about me when you were sleeping with Amanda for 6 months. You didn't care about me when you forgot my birthday. You didn't care about me when you served me divorce papers at a Christmas party in front of 200 people. You didn't care about me when you called me worthless and a burden and dead weight. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But people make mistakes. People deserve second chances." His eyes were pleading now, desperate. "Please, Jessica, I'm losing everything. The firm is pushing me out. Amanda's gone. I had to move to a terrible apartment in a neighborhood I can barely afford. Everything's falling apart." "Good." The word hung in the air between them, cold and final. "I'm glad everything's falling apart. I'm glad you're losing everything. Because now you know how it feels. Now you know what you made me feel that night." "Jessica, please." "Do you want to know something?" She stood up, walked to the windows, looked out over the city where snow was starting to fall again, just like it had that night 3 months ago. "That night at the party, I was going to tell you something. I had a gift for you wrapped in my purse, a Christmas ornament with a note inside." His face showed confusion, a flicker of hope. "What was it?" Jessica turned to face him, her hand resting on her stomach, on the visible swell of pregnancy he couldn't possibly miss now. His eyes followed the gesture, and she watched understanding dawn on his face. watched the color drain from his skin. "No," he whispered. "You're not. I'm 6 months pregnant." Her voice was steady, strong, absolutely certain. "I found out 2 weeks before the Christmas party. I was going to tell you that night. I thought maybe it would fix things between us. I thought maybe you'd be happy. I was so stupid." David's legs seemed to give out. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. "That's my baby. That's our baby." "No." Jessica's voice was ice. "This is my baby. Mine and mine alone. You signed divorce papers that I had modified by the best attorney in Chicago. You assumed all marital debt. There was more than you realized. You gave up any claim to assets discovered after separation. That's $30 billion you walked away from. And you specifically agreed that I would retain full custody of any children born within 10 months of our separation in exchange for me waiving spousal support. Your lawyer really should have read those documents more carefully. But you were so eager to be free of me, so certain I had nothing to offer. You signed without even looking. You can't do this. I have rights." "You have exactly the rights you signed away." Jessica pressed a button on her desk. "My lawyers assure me everything is completely legal. You could challenge it, of course. You could hire an attorney and fight for custody. But that would be expensive, David. Very expensive. And you'd be fighting me. A woman with unlimited resources, a woman who can hire the best legal team in the country, a woman who has 30 billion reasons to make sure you never get near this child." Security appeared at the door. David looked at them, then back at Jessica, and something in his face crumbled completely. "I loved you," he said, and maybe he even believed it. "I know I hurt you, but I did love you once." "No, you didn't." Jessica's voice was quiet now, not angry anymore, just sad and tired and done. "You loved the idea of me, the supportive wife who made you look good, the woman who made herself small so you could feel big. But you never loved me, David. You never even saw me. And the tragic thing is, I was always enough. I was always valuable. I was always worth something. You were just too blind to see it." She nodded to security. "Please escort Mr. Montgomery out of the building and make sure his name is added to the restricted access list. He's not to be allowed back." As they led him toward the door, David turned back one last time. "What are you going to tell our child about me?" Jessica thought about it, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Nothing. I'm going to tell him nothing about you. As far as this child is concerned, you don't exist. You're not his father. You're just someone who made a choice, and that choice has consequences. He'll have my grandfather's name, my grandfather's legacy, and he'll grow up knowing his great-grandfather was a man who built something meaningful, who cared about people, who used his power to make the world better. That's the kind of man I want him to become. Not you. Never you." The door closed behind David, and Jessica was alone again. She stood at the windows watching snow fall on Chicago, her city now, her empire, her future. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with messages from the foundation she'd started last month, the Montgomery Center for Social Innovation, providing free space and resources to nonprofits fighting poverty, supporting education, protecting children. Her nonprofit experience, the skills David had dismissed as worthless, now ran a $500 million foundation that was changing lives across the city. Caroline Westbrook appeared in the doorway, her chief legal counsel now and her friend. "How did it go?" "He knows about the baby. He knows about everything." Jessica turned from the window. "And he knows there's nothing he can do about any of it." "How do you feel?" Jessica considered the question honestly. "Free. For the first time in 7 years, I feel completely free." That evening, Jessica sat in her penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the city lights spreading out below like stars fallen to earth. She'd bought this place last month, decorated it herself, chosen every piece of furniture and every painting and every plant. It was hers in a way nothing had ever been hers before. She read her grandfather's letter again, something she did most nights now, reading it aloud to William, who kicked and moved inside her as if he was listening. "Use this gift wisely, but don't let it change who you are. The world needs more kindness, not less. I didn't let it change me, she whispered to her son, her hand on her belly. I let it reveal who I always was. Outside, snow fell on Chicago. Inside, Jessica Montgomery, billionaire CEO, mother-to-be, survivor, planned her next foundation project, a scholarship program for women returning to school after divorce, for women rebuilding their lives, for women who'd been told they were worthless and needed someone to show them the truth. She'd call it the Second Chances program, and it would change thousands of lives, and maybe that was the best revenge of all, not destroying David, but building something so meaningful, so powerful, so good that his betrayal became the catalyst for incredible change. She never thought about David anymore. But sometimes, late at night with her hand on her growing belly, she thought about that woman at the Christmas party, the one who'd felt so small, so worthless, so lost. And she wished she could go back and tell her, you were always enough. You were always powerful. You were always valuable. You just needed to remember. And soon you'll have proof. Soon you'll have everything. Soon you'll understand that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. Jessica looked out at her city, at the empire she'd inherited and was transforming into something her grandfather would be proud of, at the future she was building for her son, and she smiled. Not because David was suffering, though he was. Not because she'd won, though she had, but because for the first time in her entire life, she knew exactly who she was and exactly what she was worth. And that knowledge, that certainty, that power, that was something no one could ever take away. We want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Drop your city or country below. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective, touch your heart, or remind you of your own worth. Because everyone deserves to remember they were always enough. Everyone deserves their moment of transformation. Everyone deserves to know their value. Thank you for watching.